Hi, my name's Ian. Welcome to my channel, and apologies for being in my my den of iniquity again. Although this is the first time in a while that I've done a video straight to camera with all of this stuff around me. But this is my this is my office, and during this period of plague that we're just coming out of, or hopefully coming out of, this has also been my workplace and my recording studio and my hobby place and my library and everything else. So it's traditionally a complete tip, but it's been even more of a tip over the last year and a half. So doing stuff like this has been rather interesting. So today what I'd like to do is touch more on specific classic old Dungeons and Dragons adventures, and in light of the original Adventures Reincarnated series that Goodman Games has been going on. So what I thought I'd do this time out is to pick on the first one of those volumes and the modules connected to it. So that's that's this puppy here, which is a conversion and, what do they call it? Conversion and classic homage to the first two modules in the B series of Dungeons and Dragons Adventures, which is B1, In Search of the Unknown, and B2, Keep on the Borderlands. Also, while I remember, because there's just been a whatever they're doing next door, next door over that way. They're having some building work done, so if you hear funny little growls of power tools and everything else in the background, then that's what that is. I have no control over that whatsoever. And God knows what time this morning they started. Anyway, let's get to it first. So I'm just going to go and review over over the original adventures first, before we get to the Goodman conversion and its take on things, and you know what I think on my experience of them, and all that fun stuff. So the B1, In Search of the Unknown. This I think is about fourth printing, I think, of it. The 1981 printing anyway. But it was first printed in 1978. Now, the copyright date is an interesting thing on this. It was included in the Homage, the blue box, whatever you want to call it, edition of the basic Dungeons and Dragons rules from 1978 on. Those rules were published in 1977, and they originally came with a booklet of maps, geomorphs, and play aids, tables, and so on. So later on, with a monochrome cover, not this one, the monochrome cover, that it was introduced into that set as a introductory adventure, what have you, tool for learning, from 1978 on. And the copyright dates of the modules start in 1979. So there is a bit of a disparity there, and the 1979 date is not correct. So the first printing of this was 1978. Written by Mike Carr. The premise of the adventure is basically to teach new Dungeon Masters, people that are new to the game, how to put adventures together, really. There's a little bit in terms of how to actually play, or how to run a game as a Dungeon Master. But mainly, the main focus of it is actually giving you the opportunity to go and put a dungeon together yourself. To that end, what it does is it includes blank little areas like this. Wait for it to go through. Can you focus? Can you focus? I can't see if it's focused or not. But regardless, we'll put some on the screen if not. where and tables and stuff at the back of the book to give you a hand on this, so that you can go and stock the dungeon yourself. So it gives you the maps, and it gives you a rough description of the rooms, and then gives you advice, helpful hints, and blank areas in order to fill your own monsters or ideas on monsters and treasure and so on in the module itself. So everyone's copy, everyone's version of this ended up being different. Very useful, I think. It serves a slightly different purpose, or the focus of it has a slightly different purpose to its how do you call it, antecedent, next one on the line, B2. Serves a different purpose to B2. They're both learning and introductory adventures, but probably due to the nature of the different authors, it takes a completely different approach to that. So the way this is set up, like I said, it's for taking Dungeon Masters through the concept of prepping their games, of stocking a dungeon, of the kind of things that they should be looking at from the monsters and the treasure they put in there, the sort of room descriptions they should be aiming for, and so on. So it's largely blank, room descriptions, no monsters, hints on how to put monsters in there, bunch of tables and so on to help you do that. A lot of advice in putting it together. So really, an introductory adventure that is taking the Dungeon Master through the steps of preparing an adventure to play. And leading on from that, it is a good introduction into writing your own dungeons leading on. So here's a largely unstocked module with some advice in order to do that, and then the next stage on from there is obviously draw your own maps and provide your own room descriptions. It is what it is. It's a pretty standard dungeon, really, from that perspective. You can make it more interesting by putting a different mix of monsters in there. Some of the rooms are more interesting than others, but for the purpose that it was written, which is that introductory kind of thing, that come play this game, try this game out, and so on, it serves that purpose very well. And even today, I mean, the fact that largely the rooms are unstocked and stuff, you can pick this up for any edition of D&D or any other fantasy game or whatever you want, really, and use the maps and stock them with whatever works. So for the purpose that was as a dungeon adventure, yeah, okay. As an introduction, as a tutorial tool, as a hand-holding type thing on Dungeon Masters taking their first steps into this, it's good. It's good. So on to B2 now. I know I've got several copies of this. I could only find 2. For some reason, this was one of those adventures that you accumulated. I have a theory about a number of things. Things like for guitars, for the string winders that you get, for copies of B2. A number of other things. Those things that you can't remember ever buying, but you end up accumulating them anyway. Pastry brushes. I've got a collection of pastry brushes. I can only ever remember buying one pastry brush in my life, and for some reason I've got a drawer full of, not full, but I've got more pastry brushes than I'll ever need. They're just things that accumulate. Copies of Bat Out of Hell. I'm pretty sure that's one of the most popular albums ever, because everyone has got 5 copies that they've randomly accumulated over time. Anyway, so I have 2 copies of this that I could find. I know I've got other copies in there. So when the basic set was revised by Thomas Moldvay and in 1981, B2 took over from B1 as the module that was included in the box. as the introduction adventure that would help you learn how to be a DM and learn how to play. It was also, if you joined in the UK before the membership of the RPGA became more of a thing over here, we had something called the Players Association. And the Players Association, when you joined them, you got a bunch of free gifts and what have you. And when I joined, I got a copy of B2 as well as some other odds and sods. So that was another copy that came in. The fact is, I've never gone out and purposely bought a copy of B2. It's always come with, like you've been given with it because of some membership somewhere. Oh, I think I got a copy when I joined the IPGA as well. Or was that a bit... I can't remember. This is too long ago. But regardless, this damn thing turned up all over the place. And there was a time when it was pointless playing it with anyone because everyone else had like 10 copies of the damn thing lying around as well. Both of my copies are absolutely wrecked. If you want the horrible truth, no, I won't go into that. But I did have a filing system at one point, which is why this is all cut up and filed. Which I then got rid of. So a lot of my modules, my early modules at least, were prepared for being put into a folder, which is this one, which is all a bit loose leaf, and this one is missing the first few pages, missing the first. Oh, right, okay, the first sheet. So pages 1, 2, and 27 and 28. Oh, I'll be surprised. Has it got the wilderness map inside it? No, so it's missing the inner sheets as well. There was one copy I can remember sitting on my bedroom floor as a kid, where I'd found some. Might have been a photocopy of the map pages that come with this thing, and using tape, clear tape, sellotape, if you're in the UK, whatever. So you had the wilderness map that came with B2 in the middle, and then I taped 8 other pages around it to extend out the wilderness, so I had a bigger area of wilderness for characters to go through. So all sorts, these poor things. It's a good job that I ended up with multiple copies of the damn things, because they got abused. Strangely, my copy of B1 is absolutely, other than page yellowing from age and staples doing what staples do over time, is intact and pristine, whereas B1 has been kicked down the mountain a few times. Anyway, enough of my module abuse as a child. So B1 was originally published in 1979, written by Gary Gygax. Sorry. It's when you read words and you don't hear them spoken for many years or decades. So when you read them, you come up with your own pronunciation of things, and then when you finally, decades later, get to hear them spoken properly, then you realise you've been wrong, but it's still hard to get out of the habit. Besides which, I'm looking at you, Dragon Magazine, people spell my name wrong a lot, and yeah, arguments with banks over the way my name is spelt and everything else. So I feel no sorrow or remorse for getting other people's names wrong as well. They can go through the same hell as me. Tough. So Gygax, written as an introductory adventure as well, but I'll the difference being, this one goes more into the rules, more into advice on see this, how to be an effective dungeon master. That is very good section even today, and it's really where the other one was really kind of guiding you through putting an adventure together and stocking dungeons and so on. This one guides you more through how to be a dungeon master during play. So B1 gives you how to take on those dungeon master roles, dungeon master responsibilities in preparing to play, and this one focuses more on how to be a good dungeon master during play. It's a slight different focus on the thing, and they both cover both grounds. This one goes into the actual at the table thing more. So there's not an exclusivity of departments between the two, but there is more of a focus on one and the other between them. So what's the idea? So the idea of B1, B1 is just a dungeon. The idea between B2 is that you're presented with a small wilderness campaign area and a safe base, safe-ish base for the players, and there's an area with several mini dungeons relatively nearby, and a few scattered interesting wilderness points that they can run into too. So the general way that it's set out to be played is that the players will go visit the place where all the evil is, go and do something there, come back, restock, resupply, do whatever they need to do there, and then following on from whatever discoveries they may have made in their first foray, they go back, do something more, go back to the eponymous keep, restock, resupply, heal up, and so on. And what this does, it gets players into the habit. I've noticed in the minds of some players that I've come across over time, is that they've got this mentality that they dive into an adventure and they stick with it. They may be beaten to crap, or they try and find a room within the dungeon in order to rest up, and so on. And that wasn't always the premise, and it wasn't the basic premise of approaching an adventure. At least not the conceived one. The conceived premise was that an adventure location would be revisited several times with the players returning to a safe base each in between each foray. So this whole idea of barricading yourselves into a dungeon room and trying to rest up there wasn't necessarily I'm not going to say the correct way to do it, but it certainly it wasn't the normal expectation. And somewhere along the line, I think this is where things like, especially in the older editions of Dungeons and Dragons, where magic users don't have that many spells to throw around, and how can they continue adventuring when they've only got one spell? But the idea wasn't for them to go and stay in the dungeon and constantly have to rest up and so on. It's like you go as far as you can, work out things as far as you can, go back to civilization or as near to damn it as you've got. Rest yourselves up, sort everything out, training, level up if you can, and so on, then go back again. So the onus of lack of resources and everything else, and resources running out, isn't so bad a thing at that point. And even in the G series of modules, if you read the Steading of the Hill Giant Chief, G1, even though the player characters are fairly far from home in that, there is still this hint that they establish a safe base first and stock that up with any supplies and stuff that they need to resupply themselves as they go through, in a safe place to rest, while they make more than one foray at the giant steading. And maybe things change each time they go back, but it's not this go to the giant steading and wipe it out in one fell swoop. It's like go find out a bit, defeat some bits, come back, rest up here and resupply at your safe camp, then make another foray. Anyway, B2 is set up exactly like that. You have a safe camp, you have a dungeon nearby, and off you go, and you make several forays in between the two to eventually work your way up to discovering more about some plot elements that have been built in relationship between the Caves of Chaos, the lair of evil there, and the keep itself. So there are story elements that you can build up on as the adventurers get a bit more experience and as they go through the various things. Now, a lot of accusations have been made about B2, and the fact that there's, a quick glance at that, spoilers. the damn thing is like 40 years old. So if you're worried about spoilers at this point, then there's a problem. But if you can sort of vaguely see that, it's made of lots and lots and lots of little mini dungeons, and some of the arguments against it are, it makes no sense. Why aren't these things that the various dungeons having to go at each other, and the humanoids in them warring on each other, as is their generally described nature, and so on. And there have been attempts over time to explain why that's not happening, and from my perspective, doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's a training dungeon. It's a training module with several mini dungeons in it that the players can cut their teeth on and get the basic idea of what Dungeons and Dragons is about. If you start worrying about semantics, if you start worrying about ecologies and the socio-political nature of a ravine with a bunch of humanoids in it, then take a few steps back, breathe easily, and remember it's a game, and this is a first foray meant to teach you about the basics of the game first. Then, as people get used to the rules and stuff. So I have to keep drinking at the moment because for some reason my throat is really, really dry. Yeah, so don't worry about the logistics. Just worry about the players having a good time, and you as a novice DM, if you're a novice DM, playing it as a teaching tool for yourself and your players, actually just figuring out how the game works and so on. Don't add massive amounts of complexity right off the bat, which is I think some games make that mistake. They don't lead you into the premise of the game first, or how the rules are, or how it's meant to play, with air quotes, because I don't believe there's any one single correct way to play a role-playing game. As long as you're having fun with the game, that's it. That's the be-all and end-all of any game. Have fun with it. If you're not having fun with it, go play a different game, because, whatever. There's no point in just pushing yourself through a game that you don't like. So this is your starter, and it's good. I think it is good by demonstration, because it's a classic. It often appears on people's top 10 lists. It is quite famous in the industry, or at least within the Dungeons and Dragons part of the industry. And it's still going to, obviously through Goodman, it's still going today, and it's still recognised as being one of those pillars upon which the Dungeons and Dragons throughout the 1980s was built on. It was allowed to go out of print in the early 80s, so it was in the box set from 1981, from the Moldvay set 1981 through to 1982, and then when the BECMI series started, Frank Menser's revision of the basic rules started in 1983. Then it wasn't included then. They didn't include a module within the red box sets, the Menser sets from 83 on. So it was allowed to go out of print in favour of modules that were built more around the structure of the BCMI rules, the 1983 revisions. So this adventure works for first edition AD&D, for the two from the 1977 and 1981 basic rules revisions, and it still works for any further editions of D&D. But it wasn't written with them in. Well, obviously it wasn't written with future editions of D&D in mind, but it is a product of its time. So the further the edition that you are playing with it, away from those initial basic editions and first edition AD&D, then the more consideration you have to make for some of the encounters and some of the populations within there. Anyway, that's B2. I have rambled on about all sorts of stuff with this thing, but it's certainly that there are a lot of DMs of a certain age and players of a certain age that cut their teeth on this thing, and it is like I said, one of the pillars upon which the Dungeons and Dragons side of the hobby, at the very least, has been structured on. Okay, so both B1 and B2 were then included, at least in part, in this thing. Now, let me have a brief word about this thing. This was released in 1987 as a compilation. What it is, TSR went through a period of compiling a lot of older adventures together. So they did it with the A series. They approached these compilations in two ways. One was just a compilation, as a re-presentation of those original adventures in compiled volumes. The other method of doing it was to present those adventures that were or may not have been part of an ongoing series, an ongoing narrative. I mean, like the GDQ series was a narrative as when it was originally published. Same with the A1 to 4 series, they were published as a narrative in their original form. But the B series weren't published as a single narrative in their form. They were standalone adventures for the large part. And in a similar way, like I said, the S series of modules weren't a single narrative. So the compilations, in a lot of cases, when they put them together, they revised the narrative, or they tinkered with the narrative, or they created a narrative where there wasn't necessarily one before, to either the betterment or the worse of the original adventures they were compiling. In B1 to 9, this In Search of Adventure, what they did was they took the original 9 basic B series of adventures and created them into a narrative. Now, there's not one narrative in here. What they did was to work out logical routes and also difficulty level of each module. Like some of the basic modules were released as training tools, like B1 and B2, and introductions, and some of them were a bit more complicated. So they weren't really introductory adventures, but they were adventures for low-level characters. What they did in B1 to 9 is they worked out this flowchart, which basically describes all 9 modules in a natural flow. So, for example, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So about 5 modules in each of the flows, 4 or 5 modules in each of the branches of the flow, and they feed into each other, and ultimately all of the flow charts end in the Veiled Society, which is perhaps from both the players and the dungeon master's point of view, one of the more complex of the B series. Now, both the Caves of Chaos, which is the primary adventure location of B2, and the dungeon from B1 are given in this. You can see here. So we've got the Caves of Chaos as a side track there, and we've got Caves of Quasqueton, which is B1 really, as a side track there. So they're given as optional side quests to the main parts of the flow. And the keep neither the module, in fact very few of the modules that made it into this volume are presented in full. What we have with B2, we're missing the keep entirely, and it just goes straight for the Caves of Chaos, looking at the dungeons there. And what we have for B1 is just the map, and in fact the entry, there we go, just both levels of the module just on one page half size. And in fact all it says really about B1 is this was an adventure that you could that described how you could stock your own version of it. So we provided the map, and you can do what you like with it. So unlike B1 itself, where you've got descriptions of the rooms and some advice on how to stock it, in B1 to 9 you just have the map, and you can do what the hell you like with it. Yeah, so it's okay. I've run this a couple of times with beginner players, and it's interesting. It's interesting to see, because at the start of it, there are several sort of clues that the players are laced with, and from there that takes them into one of 3 directions, which then leads to a whole different branch of modules or partial modules that they play through. So as a campaign, I quite like it. So yeah, in search of adventure, a good low level compilation / campaign adventure for the Dungeons and Dragons game, that's usable by virtually any edition. But then again, the difference in edition, I think with this it's probably easier with any of the basic editions. Certainly first edition AD&D, certainly second edition AD&D. You may have a little bit of a hard time with third and fourth, and really easy with fifth. As we said before, fifth edition was really written from a perspective of being able to pull any adventure off the shelf from any previous D&D edition and being able to run it with little to no difficulty. So that's B1 to 9, and covering it because it does, in a partial way, cover both B1 and B2. So leading on from there, the next resurgence of it came in the Silver Anniversary series. There's quite a few of these. I think Ravenloft, the Giants, White Plume Mountain got one. So in the Silver Anniversary, in 1999 to 2000, the Silver Anniversary editions, re-releases of various modules came through. Now, what this does, it's for second edition AD&D, but I think you should be able to run it with virtually anything. And what can I really say about this? It's not a representation of the original B2. There are more details in it. The NPCs, there's better naming of it. The advice to, in terms of DM advice and prep and so on, and also in play advice, much in the same line as B2 itself, and some of the paragraphs are actually lifted from B2. It's all there. The caves are there in a pretty colour map. Oh, cool. The caves are there in a pretty colour map, and the keep is also present and described. Some of the bits that are actually missing. So in B2, like I said, when I was rambling on about that, there are a number of little story elements that are scattered within the keep that tie into the area as a general whole, in the Caves of Chaos, and specifically that you can build on over time, and as the players get more into it, and they then more of these hooks can come into play. A lot of those are just plain missing from this. I think who authored it? Who authored it? Mr. Reynolds, was it? No, it was John Rateliff. Okay, so the author put a lot of effort into providing more descriptions for the keep. I mean, the keep is very much extended out. There's lots of more description there. There's a whole section on adventures in the keep itself, and like I said, most of the NPCs are more fleshed out than they were in B2. so there's a lot going on there, and you know, there's a lot more expansion on the areas in the in the Caves of Chaos. Caves of Chaos itself. I mean, what you're doing is you're pretty much saying that there's a 32-page adventure, which was the original Keep on the Borderlands, and now we've extended it out to 64 pages, largely by adding more detail, but also taking away a lot of those subplots. And adding some really strange choices into various things. So I think the additional detail that they're provided in here is good and can be lifted back if you're going to be playing the original Keep, or indeed Goodman's conversion of it. You can lift some of those elements from it. It's not for me. It's not satisfying as an adventure in itself. Like I said, some of the subtler points and subtler links between the Keep and the caves and that whole way that adventure is structured are missing. Other ones have been put in their place, but not so direct. It's more about, we've added some more details in there so the adventurers can do more in the Keep. We've added some more details in here so the adventurers can do more in the Caves of Chaos. They've kind of missed out a lot of the subtle connections between the two. So I think that's a shame. Oh, where did we get to? Brief pause while the phone went. Yes, so a lot of pages, a lot more detail. I think it's missing a bunch of stuff, but it's not entirely without worth, because I think there's a lot of stuff in here that, in combination with either the Goodman Games one or the original, you can build something quite good with the two in concert. Right, so that brings us on to now. I've gabbed on a bit, so I'm just going to give a bit of an overview and review of where we've got up to at the moment. So we've got up to B1, B2, and B1 to 9, and return to Keep on the Borderlands. With B1 and B2 together, because of the overlap, but also additional tutorial bits that they do, the difference in focus between the two, I think taken together, they form a great teaching tool for, like I said, for any edition of D&D. The wilderness area of presented in B2, which also incorporates B1 as an option, but you know, most people did, follows on. If you actually go and delve into sort of campaign and adventure building from the Dungeon Master's Guide, and also within the pages of the expert rulebook, the advice there. Oh, if I can find it. Here you go. The owner's advice. So you know, you've got you've got drawing a map of the area, and then you've got put your base town in, shove it near a road, and shove it in the dungeon so that it's not too close to the town and not far away from the town. So it's not too close to the town as the damn thing would just affect what the hell's going on in the town. And the town in the Keep in the Borderlands is basically the Keep, and the dungeon itself is not more than a day's journey away. And in Keep in the Borderlands, it's not more than a day's journey away. The players can quite easily reach it, do whatever they need to do, and get back into to the Keep. And similar advice is given in a typically more Geigexian flowery way in the Dungeon Master's Guide, where you have got the characters interacting with the local population, with regular people, a few unusual types, and you have that, a few unusual types in B2, especially those that connect into the Caves of Chaos. Stock with goods available to the players, yes, so it's a place that they can go and resupply. And you know, the settlement isn't far away from the testing grounds for novice adventures. So you know, the Caves of Chaos, where they go and actually have their adventures. So B2 fits absolutely within that remit. You have You have a settled, relatively safe area that the players can go back and rest and regroup and resupply, and you have the adventure location not too far away from it, but not too close, that they can go off and get a sense that they're heading into the wilderness and into danger. So they've got that interplay between those two locations, and B2 absolutely does that. The irony behind the Silver Anniversary is a lot of the tutorial and hints and how to play specifically second edition. A lot of the rules iterations there will help with understanding the rules, but I mean, the gameplay stuff is ubiquitous. It doesn't matter what edition you're playing. Some advice on how to play the game is going to work with any edition, but when you're actually going into rules and how to interpret this and how to dish out experience points and how to go along those lines, it was a bit ironic, I think, that they included that in the Return to Adventures, given that third edition was imminent at the time that was published. So, a nice introduction to second edition D&D and playing second edition AD&D came right at the end of second edition's life. So yes, definitely B1 and B2 deserve to be on any DM's bookshelf, and B1 to 9 and Return to the Keep of Borderlands, not as much, but if you've got the space, or you've want something along those lines, then yeah, sure, go to it. I think I've had a lot of fun out of B1 to 9. I've not had so much use or worth out of Return to the Keep on the Borderlands, but your mileage may vary. They're not bad. Different levels of good, I think. So on to the main focus of this, the homage and conversion of them. This was Goodman's first foray into this. So it's OAR 1, the first volume of this series that they're continuing on today. They are up to volume 5, which is Castellamber, which we've dealt with in another video. I haven't covered volumes 2, 3 and 4 yet, but I will do. And volume 6, as the time of this video, volume 6 is on its way, which is the Temple of Elemental Evil, which I'm quite looking forward to, because another one. They seem to have targeted my favourite modules as they're going on so far. They haven't reiterated Raven. They're not going to, obviously, because Wizards of the Coast. I think the adventures that Goodman were allowed to pick up were from a list that Wizards of the Coast gave them, in terms of these are things that we're not going to be using, so you can do unto them as you wish. And obviously Wizards of the Coast have done stuff with Ravenloft, so Goodman were never going to do Ravenloft, but it's quite nice that these things are being redone, things that haven't been redone for a while or revisited for a while, rather than Ravenloft, which just gets revisited all the bloody time. Anyway, so into the Borderlands. It follows the same pattern. If you're not familiar with these books, what they do, they break them down into several sections. So the first section is usually it's the table of contents. So the first section is an introduction and some interviews with people. Some introductions written by people. Then, after all of those, and I'll comment them in a second, you have an interview with Mike Carr, who is the author. And then you get into the reproductions of the original adventures themselves. And then you get to the conversion of the adventures themselves. So So at least half the book, all of this, is given over to interviews and introductions and facsimiles of the original adventures, scans of them, whatever you want to call them. And this section of the book is actually conversions, and there's a few sort of colour plates with the original module covers and conversions of some classic monsters and what have you, some new stats and new spells and new magic items. So this is largely a museum piece, and this is largely playable new stuff going forwards from a 5th edition point of view. So that's how these books work. All of the OAR books are contain that sort of split if they have a different page count or a different percentage of the book given over to each section. So let's go through it section by section. We have an introduction by Luke Geigs. That's an interesting one because Luke Geigs, obviously, his father wrote the module, wrote Dungeons and Dragons, and from Luke's perspective, he was one of the first people to actually go down a lot of the dungeons that Gary Gygax wrote and put together, including the Keep on the Borderlands. So his perspective is quite interesting from that point of view. Mike Miles, who was at the time the creative director of D&D, he's now moved on, but you know, a word from him about the way that it goes is from the perspective of the current design, or what was the design philosophy of D&D, this was released when 5th edition. Yeah, 5th edition was already out when this came out. But from the perspective, yeah, of course it was. It's a 5th edition conversion, you prat. Anyway, from the perspective of the design philosophy that governs Wizards of the Coast's iteration of D&D, it's an interesting perspective that Mike Mills puts forward. Then there's some people that I don't know, and I think that most of them are authors that have written things for Goodman Games, but I think their perspective is, no disrespect to them, but in a book that, you know, you're talking about however much it costs, not the cheapest book of $50, not the cheapest book in the world. Their perspective on things isn't really worth that much. That's not to say that their perspectives on things, but largely, you know, you've got a reiteration. Oh, this is we played it, and I quite liked it. That sort of sums up that. Then you've got we played it and we quite liked it. Another guy, and then I collect D&D stuff and I quite like it. I think that's 3 pages and 4 unnecessary pages. This is interesting. Interviews with the original author, for me, are really interesting, because sometimes when you pick up adventures, you read them from your perspective. At some point I may go on to the difference in between American and British perspectives, or, you know, in a historical way, to fantasy tropes. If you actually look at British fantasy literature and American fantasy literature, and also in Dungeons and Dragons terms, the adventures that were written by and published by TSR UK, and those that the vast bulk of them that were written by TSR in the US and other American publishers, there is a difference in feel and pacing and overview. So British fantasy tropes are not necessarily, there's an overlap, but there's not necessarily the same as American fantasy tropes. So when we as Brits read these American stories, we put our own tropes on them. Obviously, an adventure is a bare bones thing. It's not a novel, and it's not a script. So you rely on your own interpretation of the written word and the feel that you're getting from the skeleton of the adventure that you're going to go into, and you'll put your own interpretation of that as you're going through. So from my perspective, it's interesting reading interviews with the original authors especially if they're American authors, because you get a sense for what they felt when they wrote the adventure, and that can then sort of give you a better understanding of some of the things that, you know, with someone from a different cultural background reading went, I'm not sure what this is on about, or interpreted it in a completely different way. Now, there's nothing wrong with interpreting things in a completely different way. It's like adventures, you run the adventures you want, and if you're a DM worth your salt, you'll be changing things right, left and centre in a published adventure. So from an insight point of view, not in as a this is how I intended it to be run and everyone should run it like that point of view, which Mike doesn't do in the interview, but from you know, what was going through the author's mind when they put this together. It's interesting to me. And it's interesting when you read when you go through interviews with game designers on their concepts behind the games that they've written and the rules that they've written, and why they put a rule together in this way and not that way and so on, because you get more of a feel for the understanding of it. And there's a lot of conversations that you have with people when they're going, oh, this rule makes no sense because blah 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 blah, and quite a lot of the time it's because they've missed the point of the rule and the way it interacts with all the other rules of the game. You know, sometimes they're right and the rule is complete nonsense, but other times it's like a misinterpretation of the whole rather than anything else. So I would urge people to go and seek out, there's quite a few on the internet and so on, seek out interviews by game designers, especially when they're talking about the games that they've designed, and, you know, adventure writers and so on. Because they give you a perspective. I'm not saying that you should go and follow then slavishly their perspective, but it can only add to your own view of things. It's not going to detract from your view of things, even if you completely disagree. At least it's going to give you a bit more of a rounded view on things. So that goes on for a few pages, and then we've got the mystery of the cover, which is also, you know, quite an interesting one. The cover itself is credited to Dis and Dat. The original cover was credited to Dis and Dat. The later cover was credited to, there's a signature there, but I can't quite read it because I'm of the relatively blind persuasion. Oh, they didn't put the blooming credits in there. Oh, there we go. Credits, covers, Darlene. Okay, so Darlene drew the later cover, but the original cover was, so it was originally drawn by Dave Trampier and then was sort of redrawn or whatever by Dave Sutherland. So it's an interesting perspective on things. That's how modules develop and how the artistic process of actually putting adventures together and publications of any nature really, especially if they include any level of artwork. Sometimes it's a more homogeneous development rather than you know, the whole cloth comes out. Right, so now we come on to the facsimile section. So here we have there's a little bit of a paragraph that says some of the differences between the two, and what they have in here is the second and sixth publications. So they've drawn from one of the monochrome editions, the second edition of the publication, and the later colour version of the same. So the second and sixth, is that, yeah, so 1981. So the second and sixth, that's those are the internal bits. And that takes us up to, for B1, that is, takes us up to page number 92. So we're already sort of that far in the book. I'll give you my kind of thoughts on that in a sec, but you know, we're just going through the book and giving an overview at the moment. Right, so next after that, we have some examples of one of the authors and some other, presumably people associated with Goodman Games, giving pages and pages of examples of stocks that they put together for the original version of the module. That's another 20 pages, I think, something like that. And then we get into the Keep on the Borderlands. This is more facsimile, the second and fourth printings of it. There's not much difference between the second and fourth printing other than the bits of art and some layout, and that's pretty much it. But regardless, we've got another block of that going through, and the covers and the maps and everything else. Which I think I might say a bit more about that when we come to Volume 3, because I think Volume 3 of this series, of the OAR series, is the worst offender at this. But my thoughts forthcoming. And then finally, the rest of the book, or the bulk of the rest of the book, is a conversion, and is the conversion and odds and sods to it, and expansion, and I'll get into that in a second. So let's give a review. We've gone through all the sections of the book now, so let's start with our review. I've given you my thoughts on the introduction. Sorry. So I think there's a couple of introductions there that are useful, that give you a bit of insight into gaming back in the day, and also current takes as of whenever this was published. Hang on, it's 2018. What Wizards, Mike Miles gives an insight into what Wizards were thinking in their design approach in 2018. I think the Goodman associated introductions are entirely unnecessary. I didn't get anything from them whatsoever, other than, oh yeah, some other people enjoy it as well as I do. They didn't have anything to do with it other than they played it like hundreds and thousands of other people. The interview with Mike Carr, I think those interviews are essential for each one of these volumes. They can't be done for each one of these volumes because, unfortunately, some of the authors of the original modules are no longer with us, but as in the case of Casalamber. But an attempt to get hold of and interview people that were originally involved in the adventure publication, be it in the writing side or the art side or the editing side or the playtest side or what have you, I think is a really, really important addition to these volumes. The facsimiles, now from a historical point of view, then yes, I can see why they give examples of multiple printings. From a gamer, or from the worth of this book to gamers, I think one of each module is all that's needed. Pick one of them. I think it should be the latest, the later edition, later printing of the module that should make it in. I really don't see the worth of having a complete copies of more than one printing in these volumes. Essentially, with the two together, with the Keep on the Borderlands and In Search of the Unknown, being printed twice, or two printings of each in here, that to me is 64, 78, 72 pages wasted. Sure, if there are major differences, then you could put a section in there that explains the differences. If there are important layout changes or artwork changes, like, for example, there's a piece of Minotaur art that changed between the printings of Keep on the Borderlands, then show that artwork and its differences. But to actually print two full printings, probably of interest to some. For me, I just see it as wasted pages. Yeah, mileage will vary on that one, but I think depending on whether you've got more of a gamer outlook or a collector outlook. That's so yeah. My own personal view of that is it's a waste of paper. Your opinion on it may be different. Going on from there, we have the 5th edition conversions themselves. Now, so far, and we're up to volume 5 now, so far, in every single one of the conversions that Goodman have put out, I have been really impressed. I think the edition, you could use their conversion with any edition. Again, it's like 5th edition was written with the mind that you could pick up anything from any edition and play it. That works the other way as well. There's quite a lot in 5th edition that you can pick up and use with any other edition. And there's nothing overly 5th edition-y about the conversion that they've done here. Now, why would I bother to say, oh, you can actually pick up what they've done here and run it with any other edition, when quite clearly you've got the originals here to play with the editions that they were written for, and through Drive-Thru RPG, the original modules are also available for either PDF or print on demand. The reason why is because one of the good things that Goodman does very well is they take the spirit of the original adventure, and they either fill in gaps or they expand the material within them in a very thoughtful and true to the original way. I'll give you an example. So in the conversion of B1, we have, for example, this section. So the Lonely Tower, additional encounters and classifications. The Lonely Tower. Okay, so this is new material for 2018. So what's that? 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I don't know. There's a year missing in my memory through plague. But the Lonely Tower. This tower is actually hinted at in the descriptions in B1. There is a throwaway line somewhere that actually says it. And what they've done is they've taken that throwaway piece of description and gone, okay, there's a point we can expand upon. So let's go on. Let's expand it upon it. Let's give more pages over to these things and stretch it out. And they've done the same for every module that they've touched on so far. In a good way, in a really good way. So there is material in here, even if you have the original modules, there's material in here that is new, that you will not have seen before outside these volumes. So I think they're worth taking a look at from that point of view. Going back to B1 itself, what they've done. Well, actually, let's go back to the start of it itself. So what they've done with the notes. So we've got advice to Dungeon Masters, and if you remember back to my ramblings at the beginning of this video about the purpose of the introduction and the tutorial side of things, or whatever that B1 and B2 encompass, what they've done here is they've pretty much compiled all of those notes, and they've expanded on them a little bit, but they're by and large the same, and all of the preparation notes for both modules, and all the hints and advice. So we've got how to prep floor plans, how to be an effective DM, all of this kind of stuff. They have put before the conversions for both modules. So there's a load of stuff in here, and it's really useful beginning DM advice. It's pretty much the same advice that was given in B1 and B2 to start with, just put here into one section and compiled over. Another good section is this little thing here. Now that page, Advice to Players, is really useful. It goes into the ideas of planning and thinking and not playing your characters as superheroes, actually considering what your characters can and can't do, and looking ahead to fill those gaps, you know. I think a lot of the later editions ideas of, oh, let's give magic users more spells and things, ties into players demanding that because they didn't really think about how to overcome those resources in the first place. So, you know, this isn't really written from a 5th edition point of view. It's written from an overall plain D&D point of view. And some of the points are really, really, really pertinent still today, you know. All of the basic things, you know, consider your character's weaknesses, work out a way that you can overcome them. And, you know, magic user, you've got one spell. There's your weakness there. You've got your one spell, so you're going to keep that in reserve for an important, low-level magic user we're talking about, to important encounters or when you really need it. So in between times, when you haven't got any spells or you're not using that spell, what are you going to do? You've got that weakness that you need to think about how to overcome. Now it's different because you've got, you know, cantrips that you can cast over and over and over again. You've got multitudes of spells even at first level. So there's an element of that that causing players to think about their characters and how most effective to use them, which I think has sort of disappeared from the game, which is a bit of a shame. Yeah, anything that gets the grey matter moving is useful stuff. But anyway, that page, unfortunately, there's no, like, you can photocopy this for your own use or anything like that. So I won't advocate, you know, copying out of the book. But, you know, get your players to read that and see if you can surreptitiously give it to them to staple to their character sheets or what have you. Then you go into the conversion itself. The conversion of B1 is a stocked version of B1. They've given it a consistent approach to form a narrative around B1. So where B1 to 9, for example, just gave you the map and said, well, get on with it. What they've done in the Goodman book is they've actually put it together as an adventure. There is nothing that you need to do other than your usual preparation and stuff in order to do this. Now, given that their 5th edition conversion is stocked, and in the original edition of the game were all the advice that you needed to stock the original module. So if you're using the original module out of this book, you've got all the advice and space and everything else that you need to do it. This is what I was going to revisit back to this. This makes, what's our page count of useless stuff up to at the moment? 72 or something like that. But now here we've got all of these. 19 pages. Now, the way this seems to me is unnecessary indulgence on the part of the people that actually produce these stock things. One of them's one of the authors, another is another Goodman associate or something. I think these 19 pages are completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter. They really don't matter. It's like, here's our stocked version in our conversion. The originals have all the guidance and everything else that you need in order to stock them. Why? Why is this important? Why does it even matter? You're not explaining the history behind the module. You're not presenting a conversion of the module. You're just wasting 20 pages, well, 19 pages. So my considered opinion of these pages with these stock tabulated data bits with the author, pointless, utterly pointless. Shouldn't be there. Should be more good material in here instead of whatever you were trying to achieve here. So that section is disappointing for me. Anyway, flicking back to the conversion. So the coherence that they've put in their choices for stocking the rooms does produce a narrative that glues together for B1. So good choice to go and make B1 playable straight out of the book without having to go through the stocking process in the 5th edition conversion. So then we get to all the way through to the end, and then we get these additional expansions to B1, and there are 3 areas. So we've got the Lonely Tower, we have Zelagar's Sanctuary, and we have Tomb. Rogan's Tomb. And that rounds out the conversion of B1 in this book. Now there is some 5th edition reiteration. Let's have a look. So they do give you the some guidelines for stocking your own version of their 5th edition conversion, with some examples and monster stats and choices and treasure and so on. Now these go along similar lines to those that were in the original B1, which is like, you know, this is how you can think about stocking the dungeon and some advice there and so on, with tables of stuff that is relevant to the levels that it's aiming at. And they're okay. These are, if you want to go and take B1 and stock your own version of B1 using 5th edition stats and 5th edition design concepts, then you can. This chapter is really, really useful for that. So again, those 19 pages of original edition stocking of the original dungeons are made even more pointless because of this chapter. So yeah, there you go. So to my mind, this is useful, but if it wasn't there, I wouldn't miss it. But since it is there, it's useful if you do want to go down that route and not use the stock that they've produced to give their their more tied up together version of B1. Right. So once we get out of that, we are now into the conversion of the Keep on the Borderlands. It gives you some, there's the keep. It gives you more information about the keep. Again, this is expanded from the original version. There are some other bits and pieces that they've included over the stuff from the original version. But I'd just like to point out that the ties with the keep and the adventure area, if you like, in B2 that were omitted from the Return to the Keep on the Borderlands are present in the Goodman reiteration. So that's nice. It's nice that it's retained those, and it's also added a little bit more to them. So good stuff there. Now, what it doesn't do, so this is where something like Return to can fit in nicely. So this basically gives you the stats. There is some nice little sidebars and stuff that expand out and give you more connections and stuff. This bit on this particular page, it gives you a tie into the In Search of the Unknown adventure. So there was a link, almost direct link between the keep and the dungeon in the In Search of the Unknown Caves of Quasqueton dungeon, as well as links in the keep to the Caves of Chaos. So it's nice that they've included stuff like that, which makes that the whole campaign area. And given the opportunity to put both modules in one book, they've taken that opportunity and actually tied it all together. The little area, wilderness area, they've tied it together as a little mini campaign setting, inclusive of both modules. So the wilderness area itself, as you can see, they've actually named a lot of the things, the rivers and the woods and stuff. So that's nice. It makes it a bit more detailed and a bit more together. And also they've expanded out. So in the original B2, there were 4 wilderness areas, wilderness encounters that were described. They've expanded that out to 13, I believe. 12, 13, yeah. So there's 13 from 4 adventure locations within the wilderness now. So they've expanded out that, which is a good thing. You've got that mini campaign setting feel going on with this relatively small area centered on the keep. Then we get into the Caves of Chaos itself. Pretty much the same. This is almost like just taking the original module and converting it to 5th edition. There's not a huge amount difference between this and in the original. except yeah, so all of that is just the conversion over. It's almost a straight conversion on a page on an area by area basis. And then you get into this bit. So if you know the Keep on the Borderlands, the little mini dungeons are lettered and they go from A to K. What they've done is they've added a bunch more, so you've now got L, M and N. So there are more little mini dungeons. Now, when I first skimmed into this and saw that there were additional areas in the Caves of Chaos, my concern was that you're already looking at, in the Caves of Chaos area, you're already looking at a fairly crowded region of stuff. You've got all of the various little mini dungeons all in this ravine, and they're quite close packed together. So when I saw that they'd added 3 more mini dungeons into that area, I'm thinking, oh god, this is getting overcrowded and daft. But the way they've actually introduced those 3 additional mini dungeons, I think works. The scope of them is that they generally won't come into play unless the player characters or the players are particularly curious, or they go and search meticulously, or they're not immediately obvious. That's what I mean. If they go and do something in one of the existing areas, then they'll find another one of the expansion sections. If they go and hunt around in a particular area, then they'll go and find another one of these expansion areas. So they provide more to explore for those people that are curious enough and inquisitive enough and are prone to go and searching every nook and cranny. They will be satisfied in the fact that there's more for them to discover. Again, I'm going to avoid spoilers for the new stuff. Right, so a few appendices. First one, new magic items and spells. Similar sort of way. There are some new stuff, and there are some conversions of old stuff that hasn't yet made it into the core game. And similar to the new monsters in the next appendix, you have some new monsters, and you have some older monsters that have been converted over to 5th edition that haven't been converted over to 5th edition in the core source at such. The interesting thing here for me is the number of monsters that Goodman has decided to bring into the Caves of Chaos, or into this their conversions here from the old Fiend Folio is quite it was quite interesting for me to sort of go through these and go, oh, that Fiend Folio, oh, another Fiend Folio one, oh, another Fiend Folio one. So there's a good chunk of Fiend Folio monsters in there, if you're into that particular book. And also one of my favourite basic D&D monsters, the Decapus, appears in there too. So useful, a nice little, I mean, obviously the magic items and monsters, one of the things I like about adventures that include those is that new magic items and new monsters are usable outside of the dungeon that they are printed within. So you know, you not specifically tied. You know, you've got the stats for something now that is useful for your own dungeons or going forward for other things. Then finally, the last section is about non-player characters and hirelings and henchmen and followers, which was something that was also included, a bit of advice and some generation of them in B2, which has also been brought into here. It's a little bit more detailed than the guidelines that were given with B2. Not quite as detailed as the NPC personality generating tables or whatever that were included in the first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons guide, but still very useful themselves. In themselves, for just fleshing out some of the inhabitants of town, and also producing characters that the characters might, non-player characters that the characters might want to hire or take on as henchmen in their adventures in the Caves of Chaos. And which is another thing that the people don't tend to think about these days. I can remember, like for example, the G series, where you've got, I've seen people just go in there with 5 characters or something. But the alternative to that is, you're talking about 8 to 12th level, something like that. The approach that you could be taking there is you've got your primary player characters, the 8th to 12th level ones, plus their henchmen and hirelings and their followers if they've got to the point of gaining followers. So it takes into a different perspective. If you've got 5 characters going in to take on a hall full of giants, as opposed to 5 characters plus the 20 odd people that they brought with them as part of their entourage, then things take on a different theme altogether. To round off, you've got the example backpacks that I think came with B2, I think it was, or it might have been B1. They're down there, so I could look them up. Just like some equipment, sample kit equipment stuff, and a colour plate galleries of the covers and the original odds and sods. You see, this is the level to which I don't actually mind duplicates of them. I don't know why they've got. So you've got the maps there, and also the maps there. That's a bit daft to me, but certainly, nice colour plates of the original covers, and the differences between the original covers is to me, far more useful and interesting than complete facsimiles of multiple printings of the module. So that is Into the Borderlands OAR1, from cover to cover, really, with my thoughts on it. So to summarise it all up, the Into the Borderlands, it takes 2 adventures that were designed as introductory and tutorial adventures. It slams them together with the notes, the tutorial notes and the guidelines still intact and altered here and there to meet the 5th edition design criteria, but by and large useful for whatever edition. They were drawn from the original modules, and they're still applicable today as they ever were. I think they still stand. Those two, B1 and B2, still stand as good examples of what a beginning tutorial type adventure you can have. We've had numerous different examples of what beginning tutorial games can be. In the 90s, you had the big black box for basic D&D that had the card sets that you could pull out and learn the rules from. You had the various beginner games for you had First Quest for 2nd edition D&D with the CDs that came with that. You had the various starter editions for 3rd edition, and sort of similar has been applied to every edition since. I mean, we've gone through the starter box set with some of the scouts in the UK, scouts in the UK. TSR, Wizards of the Coast, TSR, Wizards of the Coast have sponsored through Dungeons and Dragons the Entertainers Badge. So we as scout leaders, we can pick up the starter box from Scout HQ, which is nice for postage alone, and I've run our scouts through that starter edition set, and the adventure itself is really good. I think it's a reasonable, it's along similar lines to B1 and B2. You've got a module type thing that handholds you through the rules of the game as you're going. So it's useful from that point of view. What's not useful is producing starter sets that are relatively expensive. When you start including, it's got miniatures and it's got this and it's got that and it's got this and it's got, if you, I think maybe the board game industry and the gaming industry in general is getting used to boxed board games and books and things costing 50 quid. The pricing of things seems to be rising, and I think part of that is because of the expectation of components that go in. But to my mind, you don't need all that. What you need is a 32-page adventure that gives over a good section of itself to hand-holding new DMs and new players through the rules and through what they need in order to play and prep their games. So a simple rule book, a simple like the old basic rule book. Like the basic rulebook, this it didn't break the bank back in the day. It's only 64 pages. A lot of that, the rules itself are only up to 28. So you've got 28 pages of rules in there. Yes, they only take you up to 3rd level, but by the time you reach that, you're not broken the bank in buying the actual rules. And an adventure that is a decent adventure. So. And given on the internet and stuff, the basic rules for 5th edition D&D are available for download from Wizards of the Coast site for free. So the starter set, I think, just all that needed to be is the adventure in it parcelled up as a module in a similar way to D&D, with some instructions in there saying, go to this website and download the rules of the game, and we'll handhold you through those. And all the rest, or maybe there's an argument to be said for inclusion of dice and what have you, but I don't know. It's been a long time since I needed something like a starter set. I have a few of them for interesting collectors. I hate to call myself a collector. I'm not really a collector. If anything, I'm shedding more material than I'm buying these days, which because of this, that's not enough room to keep everything that I no longer have use for. So the Goodman book itself, I think the book itself could have been a lot thinner, or and therefore a lot cheaper, or it could have been the same size, with more useful information in there, more useful material in there than introductions from people that don't really have what I want to call a true connection to the module, and all of that pre-stock stuff for the original modules that could have been easily got rid of. There is absolutely no point to that, and arguably the multiple printings of the 2 modules in there, to my mind that wastes pages, but I can see the argument for having those as examples for collectors to see the differences directly in comparison to each other. So I think that's where I stand on it. It's a good release. All of the OAR books are well worth having, I think. They all have their failings, they all have their plus points. But I think Goodman are doing a really good job with them across the board. The first one is no exception. I think by the time we're getting down into 4 and 5, they've learned a few lessons, because those 2, we'll get to them in time, but those 2 are more usefully put together that in ways. Go and have a look at my Castle Amber one for some of the negative points on that book, because there are a couple, but they're refined what they're doing from the first one. I think the first 3 have got similar problems, and 4 and 5 are getting there. They're getting more polish on them. I'm really looking forward to Volume 6, which I said is the Temple of Elemental Evil. So yeah, if you're an old gamer or want a bit of insight into what old gaming was like, and that feel, rather than the sort of newer design concepts that Wizards of the Coast use, but you like the 5th edition rules, then the OAR series is absolutely spot on. If you are not keen on the 5th edition rules, and I know some older players are not, then don't get it. because half the book is a 5th edition conversion, so it will not please you in the slightest. Although, get it and ignore the 5th edition bits and just use the expansion areas to the original modules, because they're pretty good. So it depends on how much usefulness you want out of a book for your $50. So yeah, like I said, I've gone away from all of this trying to mark things out of numbers, because I think it's a bit pointless. But now I've did it in a few early ones, but now grown out of it. Just pointing out things I like and things I don't like about these books, and putting that forward to you guys to go and make your own decision and make your mind up about all of these things, really. So that's a wrap for this one. I'll be getting back to what have we got coming up. I've got currently writing a script for the top tools, in my opinion, and my experience and what I've found useful over the years for referees, mainly along the lines of constructing campaign settings and world building, more than actual sitting down and play. Because really, for sitting down to play, you just need a reasonable understanding of the rules and the adventure you're playing, and some dice and probably a screen, although screens aren't always a necessary thing. But certainly for campaign building, from world building point of view, you just take any help you can get. So I've got a script in the works that describes some of the things I found most useful. And obviously we'll be continuing with our old games reviews and overviews and histories and stuff. The franchise side of things, like going into franchises that have been converted into games, there's a couple I want to do there. Not least Judge Dredd, which I think is one of the characters that I grew up with, and he's had his little jumps in and out of the role-playing and board gaming world. So there's that. And what else? Oh, the rest of the OAR series. I want to get into reviews of some original stuff as well. Someone's asked me to do a review on the Great Rift box set for Mongoose Traveller, which I'll get to at some point. So yeah, there's quite a lot on my to-do list for this channel, and also my music and prattling around with musical things, whether you like it or not, because that's what this channel was set up for originally, and that's I want to continue to do that, because yeah, music is the food of spiritual well-being. There you go. That sounds a bit hippie, doesn't it? Yeah. And there might be other stuff coming up as well, because one of the reasons why my office is such a mess is partially because I've extracted some my not American Civil War, but I'm on about my English Civil War 15mm figures out, and had a horrifying discovery about how many of them still remain to be painted, and so that box is floating around somewhere. I've got a load of BattleTech miniatures that need painting that have come through from the Kickstarter. I have got, what else have I got floating around? Oh right, yes, I've been building a track run by an Arduino with timing stuff for scouts to have a little competition on, see how fast they can make a Hot Wheels car going, which I might actually put some videos up about programming and about logic, because at the moment that's my day-to-day job is playing around with computers and getting them to do stuff. So so I might put something up from there, although largely this is my escape from that world. But yeah, I do have a little video about binary I want to put up, because the number of people, even in professional computing, that just don't seem to understand binary, where it's just really a simple thing, and about, you know, how you can actually count up on your fingers. You can count up to quite a long way with just using your fingers, beyond 10. And that's about it. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, then please subscribe and all of that stuff, sharing and so on. And yeah, until next time I get myself in front of a camera, or hide and use this microphone to go and talk to you about something rather than showing my face. But I thought what I'd do is, you know, the wife has been playing around with beard oil and rubbing it in, so I just thought I'd appear on camera to you this time around to show you how luxurious that has become, or whatever, oily, I think, more than anything. So yeah, so until next time, have fun and be nice to each other and enjoy whatever you enjoy. Take care.